Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of My Athletic Compendium. This week we are going to talk about power. Obviously we've spoken about strength, we've spoken about hypertrophy, speed, acceleration, and now it's the episode for power to complete. Would that complete the training blocks? Are there anywhere missing?
Strength, yeah.
Obviously this is your...
Power, speed, and then
Yeah.
in terms of the
So this completes all the elements of your training blocks. Obviously we've tried to lay them out in this order because that's the sort of order you would flow through anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, sort
Sort of. Well, we'll review. We'll obviously summarise towards the end about the order. But yeah, well, it's the order that we felt most important. Well, I felt most important anyway. Obviously hypertrophy first, you want to look big, then you want to get strong.
In fairness, actually, no, to be fair, we did go over the order in, what would have been in periodization.
That's very true. So if you haven't listened to the periodization episode,
check that one out.
So Max, power, what is it?
So
Apart from me, but...
Power, just power.
Pure power.
So power basically bridges the gap between strength and speed.
Okay.
So force times velocity equals power.
Force times velocity is power.
So force being strength, how much you can lift maximally. Speed, obviously, velocity is speed, so how quickly you can move something. And then them two combined together creates power.
Okay.
In terms of a sports sort of specific setting, that could be, so if you're talking about like a sprint, so like a 40-yard sprint, you've got a high force rate over your, that the first few steps of that acceleration phase.
Yeah.
And then your pickup or that transition phase from acceleration and getting into your top speed is your power.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you get into your max velocity, which is velocity. So you've got strength at the start to get that hard acceleration, those first few steps, and you've got the transition, which is power. So laying down that force but quicker, and then you get into your velocity thing. So it's that middle ground between the two. In terms of like acceleration, but in terms of lifting weights, it's kind of, and this is how you train it as well, is lifting a decent weight but fast. So obviously you can't lift so heavy where
that you're really, really slow, like a 1 rep max.
You're doing it like this, but equally you don't want to just be doing.
You don't want to go so light,
which it's just that. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of, like I mentioned in the periodization, if you're talking about getting to that peak of performance, you want to go through your hypertrophy block, then into your strength block, and then your speed and power block towards the end. They kind of link together quite well. The reason being, and this is something that I might not have mentioned to you, but I probably should have done because you're wanting to improve your speed, is you'd link the two together, so the speed and the power sort of together, because you're still going to get like a training effect from it in terms of you can, because there is some resistance in there, you can still maintain a bit of muscle mass while you're training that speed block. Does that make sense? So I put on my story, when was it, yesterday, a couple of days ago or whatever, it was just like a little joke, a video of me sprinting away from the camera and then saying, me when people try and convince me that they'll lose muscle mass while going through a speed and power block. And so you're still going to get that bit of resistance that's going to help with,
and that's because volume. You're lifting a certain amount,
resistance, a volume of weight,
right? Yeah. Despite it not being maximal.
Mega, yeah. Obviously, the more volume that you've got, the more you're going to get that hypertrophy effect. But obviously, that's not the main focus for that block. You want to be working on your speed and your power. But there is some resistance in there which will help you kind of maintain that muscle mass, I suppose, because you've got a little bit of volume in there.
Yeah.
But it will make you quicker, more reactive and powerful, obviously.
So that's essentially what the benefits are. Because whenever I think of power, my mind immediately goes to sort of not contact sports, but like fighting sports. Power as in punching someone or punching a punch bag.
That's a great example. So if you're punching a punching bag, not only, when you make contact with the bag, not only are you putting force through there, but you're also moving your fist really quickly.
Yeah.
And it is that combination of speed and strength, isn't it? So,
and obviously gloves, for example, obviously MMA have really thin gloves, so they don't weigh much, but boxing gloves, there's a different tier depending on how much they weigh. So I suppose that's the weight side of it. Yeah. And then it's how quick you can move that.
And it's, if it's a larger weight moving quicker, it's going to help with that momentum, I suppose.
So in terms of sort of lower body, the power side of it is good for sort of speed. When we're talking team sports, let's say rugby, it's good for the speed side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for a lot of things. So think about line-out jumpers. That is a powerful movement to jump with some height to help your lifters get you up there. Same with the lifters. If you're a back lifter in a line-out, you've got to have that powerful movement going from low to high to throw the man up in the air. Because a lot of the time, maybe in 15s, but definitely in 7s, they'll get to a point where you're lifting where you're almost, throwing them up in the air and you lose contact with your hands to get them just that little bit higher. But that explosive movement
is the powerful
side of it.
Yeah.
If I was just to lift him and hold him there, that's probably a little bit more strength based. But if I'm throwing him with a bit of force, with velocity, and then that's going to be a little bit more forceful and more powerful. So it's that combination between the two.
I'm with you.
And how you train that. So what that actually looks like in a training session, because a lot of, it's quite a, because it's that middle ground between speed and strength. You don't what weight do you lift? How quick do you lift it? And, if you've got the facility, then fantastic. But what a lot of rugby teams, or football teams or any sports team will use is a velocity tracker that they'd attach to the bar. So just this little device that's Velcro sticks onto the bar. You can download an app on your iPad or your phone or whatever. What we have at the rugby club is some iPads that we magnetically stick to the squat rack. So say you're doing a squat and you're trying to work on your power and you're doing a speed squat or a banded squat with a barbell. You'll have the velocity tracker on the bar, and then you'd have the speed. The bar's moving on here, and that measures the speed of the concentric element to the lift.
Yeah.
So concentric, obviously, in a squat would be on the way up, right? So you control the descent, and then you go as quickly as you possibly can on the way up. And you essentially want to find a weight to put on the bar, which you're going to hit between 0.75 to 1 second. That's the kind of speed that you want the concentric phase to be.
Right.
If you're going way too quick, if you're hitting 0.5 seconds, then the weight's not heavy enough. If you're going over 1 second, then it's too heavy. So that's how you find the kind of middle ground.
And with your professional athletes, you'll use that for a variety of different exercises, will you? So you just said squats on a squat rack, but I suppose you could do the same thing for a bench press.
Yeah, except the timings would be slightly different, obviously, because it's a smaller distance.
Okay.
So because bench press, a squat, you're going to get more movement out of the bar than if you're in a bench press. It might be a little bit shorter, so obviously the timings might be a bit quicker. In fairness, with bench press, because I don't usually do it too much with bench press, but I'm not entirely sure on the timings for it. But I know that the squat's between 0.75 and 1 second.
So what sort of exercise do you train with the power? Train power with?
So usually compound exercises. So your squat, your bench press.
Did you do it on deadlift?
Yeah, deadlift. Definitely deadlift. Maybe you could do them with cleans, but I'd try and keep it quite simple. With cleans, it's such a movement, because you have to try and get that catch.
Technique movement.
Because it's such a technical movement, it's not. You want to keep things quite simple when you're training. You want to just hit your main compound movements. Deadlift is definitely one that you can do. And if anything, I'd much I'm not a biggest fan of deadlifts.
Yeah.
Because I think people there's an ego side of things, but even just as an exercise in itself, I think it's quite not great. I'd much rather do any lifting from the floor as an Olympic lift, because the load's going to be a little bit lighter, it's less injury risk, and it kind of hits that more power element of it. As I was saying, you can whack a bar tracker on a deadlift as well to get that, extension through the hip and the knee, and that's going to be, replicable in pretty much any team sport. So that's how you train it. You're kind of looking for a weight that you can lift that's within a time frame.
And for those everyday lifters that don't
have that facility.
Yeah. Well, what do you recommend?
It's a little bit more difficult. There's loads of like resources that you can get online, and there's loads of like research papers and stuff that you can look at. But a lot of them would be a percentage of your 1 rep max.
Right, depending on the lift you're doing.
Yeah. So
it's a bit like that speed section, I suppose.
Yeah. Again, I'd have to look at the research on it. I wouldn't want to say it off the top of my head, but what percentages it would be of your 1 rep max.
But they're different depending on
the exercise.
The exercise you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
So how long would you train power for?
In terms of what, like a block?
Yeah, because we've got hypertrophy was if someone needs to put on more mass than somebody else, they'd go on 2 different hypertrophy blocks, one after the other.
So it's similar. You know, it's similar. So you can prolong it. You can make them quite short if you want to. You can make them quite long if you want to.
What's the shortest you would do?
I wouldn't do any less than 4 weeks. 4 weeks is probably the minimum I'd do. 4 weeks.
Maximum?
Probably 8 weeks with, you could go up to 10 weeks, but I'd definitely include a deload week at some point in there, because obviously power is quite taxing on, especially if you're doing a lot of like plyometrics in there as well. To help with that speed based side of the equation as well, or velocity side of the equation as well. It can be quite a lot of impact, and it can be quite taxing. So it's important, if you do have longer blocks to make sure you have a bit of a deload in there somewhere. I'd kind of prefer, like me personally, I'd rather have a 4 week block, see how I'm getting on. If I'm enjoying it and I'm getting the benefits for it, and I'm happy with my body mass, and I'm happy with how it's going, I can have a deload week and then get into another 4 week block. And there's 8 weeks of doing my power, and then I'd kind of reassess the situation. Am I getting close to Christmas and that point in the season where I can, I've got a bit of time off rugby and I can afford to have another hypertrophy block while I'm eating a little bit more and so on. You can kind of change it and adapt it slightly. But definitely, if you've got your plan and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to do 4 weeks, reassess, and then I'm going to decide whether I want to continue on to this, or if I want to move on to another element, then you can do that. But definitely have a plan, stick with it. Don't kind of start a 2 week thing and then
move on to something else.
And go on to something else, because you're not going to get the most out of it. You want to do at least 4 weeks where you're.
And when you're saying you're reassessing, obviously if you're getting any benefits out of it, is that sort of retesting those speeds again on the bar? To see if you're improving. You could. You can do that. What I did with yourself, which viewers won't see if we have any, is what we did with you is worked out your VDEC, and it's basically a load velocity profiling, which is basically where you put different. This is sled sprinting, isn't it? So, and you can share your experience with it as well. But it's basically a weighted sprint, ideally over 40 yards, but we didn't have the space, so we had it a bit shorter. And then you do a different percentage of your body weight on the sled. So we did 0%, so just body weight, just unresisted. And then we did 25%, 50%, 75%. And then we timed you over those distances, over every 5 yards, and then we worked out what speed you were doing at this point, and we worked out basically your velocity decrement
for that's optimal, where you're going to get the most power, the best. Sorry, what am I trying to say? The
like
resistance
that
you
for,
use, for the perfect weight for you to use at different VDECs. So, and that's what we were doing. So you can retest that. So for you, we collected that data, and you're currently going through a hypertrophy block, but once you've done that, we'll reassess it, and then hopefully you would have got a little bit quicker, or if you got a little bit slower, then fine, because you put on a bit of weight and so on. So we'll reassess that, work out what works for you, and then we'll get you into your speed and power block, and work on those.
And where would, obviously we've mentioned where your hypertrophy would tend to fit in, where you mentioned you could do some sort of strength work during the season as well.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Because it was less volume, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Less taxing because you're training a bit more and playing.
Yeah.
Where would the power sessions, where would the power block fit in? Would you be looking to do that more in season, or would you be looking to do that?
Again, you can depending on what you want to achieve, you can still do a hypertrophy block mid-season. But you just got to be a little bit aware of the fact that it's quite high volume when you might be playing quite a lot of rugby.
Yeah.
You just got to be aware of it and make sure that you're managing your body, or your
So there's not like a when you're in season you can't do any hypertrophy. You can do them all in a sort of rotation, can't you?
In a rotation, yeah, definitely.
But it's going to be more taxing.
Yeah, you just got to be conscious of it, and if your body is starting to get a little bit like a bit
fatigued.
Fatigued. It's taking you a little bit longer to recover and stuff. You just need to be aware of it come game day, and if you've got like a heavy training week, then you just need to be sensible with the volume that you're doing and how much you're actually putting what you're putting your body through.
Yeah.
Obviously, your power and your speed stuff is going to be less like volume and less taxing, maybe. So it's quite good to do like sort of in competition. And if you're aside from rugby, say you're in athletics, you're a 100-meter sprinter or anything, anything like that. You go through your hypertrophy block in the off season, then heading towards a competition, because you might only have 5 competitions in a season or so. You can tailor your training to that competition in particular, but because rugby is like every week for fucking whole season,
for a whole year
more or less. So you can sort of change it around a little bit, but depending on what you want to achieve. But I think for things like athletics, where you have like a competition and then you got a few weeks off and then another, you can kind of
tailor it
a little bit better, so you're smashing really, really good numbers and really powerful sessions and quick sessions just ahead of your tournament,
because you don't want to be really heavy and sluggish for your competition when you're a 100-meter sprinter. You want to be quick and powerful.
Exactly. So there's no point doing a hypertrophy block just before you do a 100-meter sprint to compete. Because obviously you want some muscle mass, because you need to have that volume of muscle to be able to lay down the power and the strength over those first few steps. But if you are a 100-meter sprinter, the hypertrophy block's going to be quite small. You're not going to be doing that for 10 weeks to put on 100, get to 100 kegs, are you?
Yeah.
Although
looking at some of the sprinters, they look like they.
But it's a height, though, isn't it? Like look at Usain Bolt. He's like 6 foot something. So that's gonna, a lot of his mass is gonna just be because he's tall, But you can. Think about other than like some of them are fucking huge, like really, really strong. But
a lot of them being caught on steroids, but
no, exactly. But it does have that that correlation of you've got more muscle mass, more cross sectional area, you've got more muscle fibers
to put down more power.
So there is that crossover. So that, and that's why you do it in that kind of an order. Do your hypertrophy, get your mass, your size, your big cross sectional area, and your muscles, and then it's about tailoring your training to make those muscle fibers really, really effective at
It's like
lifting
building a
more
bigger
weight.
engine and then tuning the engine.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly like that. You know, you're creating this big, massive V10 engine, right?
Yeah.
And then you just
And now you've
fine
got to make it.
tuning and you know, putting in an air filter to make sure that it's breathing properly. And
I've got you on a proper little tangent.
Trying to think of an analogy, a good analogy. But yeah, no, it's definitely that. So, and then you're sort of tailoring it off to get a little bit more stronger and then a little bit more quicker and powerful, and then you'd be into competition when you're flying.
Sounds good. That was short and sharp. Anything else to add?
And power, if you ask me, sorry, last little bit. Power is the most fun and entertaining and adaptable type of training. Like, I do not understand why people get stuck in this rut of doing hypertrophy block after hypertrophy block after hypertrophy block after hypertrophy, and just hitting bench press 8 reps for 4 sets or 5 sets, just every fucking session. I find that so boring. Whereas if you train for power, you know, you can do it.
You're doing jumps.
You're doing jumps. You're doing resisted sprints. You're doing Olympic lifting. You're doing banded work. You're doing, you know, so many variation. So much variation.
Just the same stuff.
Yeah. So train some power. It's fun.
I will do.
Yeah.
Straight after the hypertrophy block.
James was like, Max, I want to get a little bit quicker. Can you help me out? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, definitely. So we go through all of this testing to get his V deck perfect, work on his load velocity.
I'm like the worst client.
And then as soon as we've done all of the testing and worked out programming and everything, he's just like, Max, we're in the off season. Does it not make more sense to do some hypertrophy block?
To put a bit of size on.
Fucking hell, James, you are right, but
here we are anyway.
Anyway,
hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next week. We've got, I know what we can do next week. It'll be a nice one, but we'll keep it to ourselves and you can hear it when it comes out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care, guys.
Ta-ta.